We also tell you that the United Nations Commission has found that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, citing tens of thousands of civilian deaths and massive destruction, and has called on member countries to punish those responsible for it. The United Nations Independent International Commission of Inquiry, which does not speak on behalf of the UN, found that genocide is occurring in Gaza and is continuing to occur, as said its head, Navi Pillay.
The Commission concluded that Israel has committed genocide against the Palestinian people in Gaza and that it is continuing with that genocide.
But we are told that the number of children that have had one or both legs and arms amputated is greater than in any other conflict this century. Certainly we know the number of children who have lost one or both parent. The trauma, the psychological trauma for children will last their whole lives. These deaths are not accidents. They are not collateral damage. They are the direct consequence of a military strategy of saturation bombing and scorched earth when it comes to the infrastructure of Gaza and the people of Gaza. Residences, homes, hospitals, universities, schools, museums, churches, mosques, archaeological sites, roads, agricultural facilities, the fishing industry. Our reports over 2 years have built the full picture of the extent of the destruction. And the destruction is such, added in particular to the starvation policies, that the conditions of life in Gaza are unsupportable.
Now, joining us for further discussions on Beyond the Continent today is Professor Lyal Sunga, visiting Professor Raoul Wallenberg Institute for Human Rights and Humanitarian Law. Thank you so much, Professor Sunga, for joining us.
You're welcome. Glad to be with you.
All right, you're welcome. So, by the reason of your interpretation of what's happening in Gaza of late, is Israel guilty of genocide and other war crimes?
Well, I have to be quite precise. We don't say that a state is guilty, because guilt implies criminal responsibility. The state is an abstract legal entity, and it's quite clear that it is responsible under international law for genocide. So that's not technically speaking guilt. The fact is, by the way, that genocidal acts that were perpetrated had to have been perpetrated by individuals, obviously. The state is, as I say, only an abstract legal fiction. So the individuals who perpetrate genocide can and should be held individually responsible. That is the job of the International Criminal Court. It's the job of the International Court of Justice, and mechanism by this one, to look at the responsibility of the state, in this case Israel, under international law for international wrongful acts. So just to be precise, this report finds really overwhelming evidence to show that Israel its agents have committed genocide. It's not very much about all scholars on genocide. We all around the globe, casual commentators, experts. The evidence is overwhelming, and I'm glad that you showed those clips from the beginning, which allude to the indiscriminate bombardment that has, in some cases, in many cases, targeted civilians. We're talking 60,000 dead. Of those 60,000, 18,000 are children, and 9,000 women. These are not combatants, these are not soldiers. And this proportion, this number, are way over anything that might be considered reasonable or acceptable in terms of international humanitarian law, and this so-called collateral damage that sometimes when you hit a military target, some civilians will get killed. This is not that. This is as one of the commission members was saying, this is a scorched policy to destroy Gaza in its entirety, and the Palestinian population in whole or in part. It's not just the bombardments, but it's the blocking of humanitarian aid and the deliberate starvation policies. In case anyone doubts that, there was even an official policy document that was produced by the Israeli government that was meant to come out, but which calculates.
Yes, sorry to butt in. I'd like you to do something for us so that we can hear you properly. We need you to disconnect your earpod. Your audio seems a little bit foggy, so we can't hear you properly. Make sense, proper sense of your submission. Looking at this particular topic, if there's a way you can disconnect the AirPod so that we can have a quality audio feedback from your end. But then we are still talking about the allegations of genocidal acts being leveled against Israel by the United Nations based on what they say are facts available onto them and the different communications coming from the head of military of the IDF and of course from Knesset as regards what the army, that is the IDF, meant to do in terms of putting an end to the Hamas leadership in Gaza. Professor Sunga, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me better now?
Okay, yes. I think it's very, very better now. Thank you. Okay, so of course, based on what you said earlier, and I'm looking at the facts available.
Just a second.
Can I go ahead?
No, I'm having some trouble with you. So 1 second. Let me figure that out.
Okay.
I will get to you in 1 second.
Okay, hopefully you get to do that. But then, you know, facts available say that thousands of Palestinians, so to speak, have actually lost their lives, most especially with the calls from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying that the plan, the grand plan or the grand plot, is to put an end to the Hamas leadership wherever they may be on the surface of the earth. And that is why they did give the directive to actually attack those presumed as Hamas leaders in Qatar a couple of days back, which has actually riled the international community. And now there are claims or allegations of genocide being leveled against Israel as we speak by the United Nations and, of course, the global powers. Professor Sunga, are we good to go now?
Yes, I'm back.
Okay, beautiful. So for you, was the attack on Qatar targeting Hamas leadership or the leader, so to speak, the peak of Israel's unconscionable actions in your view?
Well, you can't come to a ceasefire if you don't have anyone to negotiate with. Hamas is a terrorist group, but so you sometimes have to negotiate with terrorists and sometimes with terrorist organizations, whether you like it or not. And the United States has supported Qatar, and Qatar has, hosted Hamas leadership members, in order so that you have an interlocutor to speak with, and so you can hopefully move towards a ceasefire, release of the hostages, and negotiate an end to this extreme catastrophe. Now, if you commit an aggression against another UN member state, that's also, by the way, it's a crime of aggression under international law. It's also an internationally wrongful act, and Israel seems to be just deliberately provoking further conflict. So I don't see very much goodwill when, on the one hand, you say, well, we want to get the, I guess there's around 44 hostages still in captivity, and you need the goodwill of your interlocutors who are holding those people, and you need to move towards some sort of a resolution. Bombing people in a foreign country and violating their airspace with your official military aircraft is pretty extreme, and it sends a message that you're not interested really in a resolution to this conflict. At least that's the way I see it. I invite anybody to come up with a reasonable alternative interpretation there, but it's I find it pretty shocking, and it really seems to me to show a lack of a good faith in any sense of the word.
Israel has dismissed the UN report, and Israel has actually said that it's utterly false and malicious. Has actually also, damned whatever reports coming from whatever quarters as regards what they are trying to do in Gaza. Now, Israel had earlier vowed not to rest until Hamas leaders are completely eliminated. And there are questions as to what could be driving Israel's defiant response to criticisms from all quarters.
Well, in a way, I mean, I'm not surprised that any country or power that commits extreme acts and tries to offer some sort of an excuse. But these kind of excuses, you see, after the horrific attack by Hamas on October 7th, 2023, Israel was fully in its rights to use armed force to defend itself and even to conduct, counterterrorism operations against the leadership of Hamas. So that would have been acceptable, and it would have been supported by the rules of international law. Maybe throughout October, November, possibly even December, if it had used precision targeting, et cetera, et cetera. That's not what Israel did. What Israel did is it started really from the beginning, very, very harsh response. But more than that, it then launched a full military campaign without distinction between civilians and combatants or targeting terrorists. And its first excuse was, well, there are tunnels under the hospitals and under universities, etc. So we bombed those. That's not what the Geneva Convention allows for. If you have a civilian center and there's some doubt that maybe there are some combatants there, that doesn't give you license to bomb a hospital. To bomb a school, to bomb, displaced persons camp. So these are very transparently empty excuses. And in case we have any doubts about that, then, we can just look at the last period of time where the death toll keeps on going up. Beyond what's, as I've said before, what is beyond is anything that you could consider to be proportionate in any sense. So, the life expectancy in Gaza has dropped from 75.5 years of age before the October 7th attack and the military campaign of Israel, down to 40.5, I think it is, years of age. What do children have to do with conflict? Well, according to some of the rhetoric that came out from Israeli officials, the idea was really more about revenge. So it's not about counterterrorism, it's not about self-defense anymore, it's about revenge. Many of the military leaders talked about revenge. President Herzog himself referred to that as a motive. Prime Minister Netanyahu whipped up all sorts of holy war rationale. Yoav Gallant called Palestinians human animals. This is obviously literally dehumanizing rhetoric. So the Commission of Inquiry has taken note of the rhetoric and the panoply of extremely destructive actions that targets civilians, UN workers, journalists, humanitarian workers. Food, water, electricity has been cut off. People are dying of disease. There's malnutrition and starvation. This is not a normal type of war. There were more munitions used in Israel in Gaza by Israel in 1 week than the United States used during its hostilities in Afghanistan, used in an entire year. And Afghanistan's a much bigger area. It's just the intensity and the official statements you have of high-level officials and in the army and politicians that seem to show, make a credible, rather reasonable inference. It's hard to come to any other conclusion, but that you're trying to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group as such, to quote the Genocide Convention. Palestinians have been recognized as one of these groups that is described by the Genocide Convention in its earlier judgment on provisional measures with regard to the South African allegations against Israel. And so it's not only killing, but it's also inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about their destruction. It's serious physical or mental harm. Don't forget there's 146,000 injured, seriously injured. One of the commission members, Krista Sidoti, there mentioned the level of amputations of children. I think there was around 4,500 amputations of children, one or both legs. It's hard to come to any other conclusion. I would be extremely happy if there wasn't this demonstrated intent and this extremely harsh actions following through on very dehumanizing rhetoric and motivations expressed about vengeance and conflation of the civilian population with Hamas. Not everybody is Hamas in Gaza. You can't target civilians coming to get food. This was what happened during this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is kind of like a strange thing set up to say that Israel and the United States are offering humanitarian access. When people went to get food, they were killed.
Yeah.
Children were killed.
So, Professor Sunga, now, of course, we realize the devastation that has been meted out to the Palestinians in Gaza over the couple of months back. Now, would you agree with me? Because we understand that people are actually, or countries or institutions are actually blaming Israel for taking this revengeful mission too far. But then, would you agree with me that if Hamas had not launched attacks in Israel in 2023, killing about 1,139 people and taking more than 300 captive unprovoked, this aggressive reprisal by IDF wouldn't have happened?
Well, you're making such an obvious point that it barely, deserves a response. There has been all sorts of, violent incidents on both sides. Israeli settlers have beat up and taken away the lands from Palestinians. They're occupying Palestinian territory, and you can go back and for decades and see that there's a lot of hostilities between these and other groups in the region. This is trying to, muddy the waters. There's no doubt that the terrorist attack on Israel was, a heinous act. It should be condemned. It's a terrorist act, but that doesn't give you carte blanche to destroy an entire territory and its population. I mean, what kind of argument is that? It's totally specious. Nobody accepts that because you could say, well, you're walking on the street. Somebody looked at me the wrong way, or they assaulted me. So I'm going to kill them and their family. It's the same reasoning. I mean, what kind of reasoning is that?
Okay, so even as we wrap up, Professor Sunga, now after this damning report and the UN's overwhelming endorsement of a two-state solution to the Israel-Palestinian crisis, are we likely to see some concrete measures taken against Knesset?
Concrete measures against the Knesset?
Yes.
Well, too many countries have really been extremely lax when it comes to trying to pressure Israel. You have the United States backing and arming Israel, both the Biden administration and the Trump administration, right through the conflict. They were sending 2,000-pound bombs. Biden interrupted them for a month. But otherwise, they knew very well that these bombs are being thrown on civilians because it's all over the press and the media. By the way, that raises the question of complicity of the United States in genocide, and any country that doesn't, try to restrain Israel, keeps arming Israel during this extreme, set of violations that look very clearly to constitute a genocide on even on the most generous, readings of it in favor of Israel, you come up with the same conclusion, because you have, if you look at the definition of genocide in the Genocide Convention, there's 5 different types of acts that you might perpetrate with the requisite intent. The intention seems to be quite clear, and 4 out of 5 of those acts that are described in the Genocide Convention have been perpetrated in such abundance that no reasonable person with a moral conscience can possibly deny this. So it's what I'd like to see is international criminal prosecutions. You have Gallant and Benjamin Netanyahu have already been indicted. There's an arrest warrant by the International Criminal Court. And by the way, Hamas leadership should also be prosecuted for their crimes under international law. Right. So whoever commits these types of atrocities has to be held individually criminally responsible. So international law applies to everyone. It applies equally. So you don't get a free pass because you're with Hamas. You don't get a free pass because you're from the Israeli side or from any side, or you're from the United States or from some other country. You cannot be killing children and causing such damage and horror to an entire population that it basically fits very neatly the whole Genocide Convention definition.
Yeah, Professor Sunga, amidst all this back and forth, the question in so many people's mind is, will there be justice? Will there be accountability? And when will a peaceful resolution, a lasting one for that matter, come into play? And how soon that will be? Those are the questions that a lot of people are hoping that answers will be provided pretty soon. Professor Lyal Sunga, visiting Professor Raoul Wallenberg Institute for Human Rights and Humanitarian Law, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us on the conversation.
You're welcome. Thanks very much for having me.
Of course. It's a pleasure.